Hello, good morning. Thank you all for being here. So it is my great honor to introduce Juan Mendez, a professor of human rights law in residence at American University Washington College of Law, where he is faculty director of the Anti-Torture Initiative, a project to WCL's Center for Human Rights and Humanitarian Law. For anyone doing anti-torture work and fighting against to end the use of solitary confinement, Mr. Mendez needs no introduction. There is a lot I could say about all of his accomplishments and critical work. Juan Mendez is the former UN Rapporteur on Torture. He has also served as advisor to the International Criminal Court, Commissioner of the International Commission of Jurists, President of the International Center for Transitional Justice, and Special Advisor on the Prevention of Genocide. And the list goes on. Mr. Mendez is a renowned legal scholar and author. He has received numerous human rights awards, but none of this alone really captures who he is as an advocate, a tireless and courageous human being. So let me share an anecdote that perhaps does. I first met Mr. Juan Mendez Friday, October 18, 2013. It was many years ago when I was organizing with family members against the use of solitary confinement in the state of California. And at this time, my son was being held in Pelican Bay State Prison, and they had organized hunger strikes against the use of solitary confinement. Over 300 human beings held in isolation submitted a petition to Mr. Mendez, the then UN Special Rapporteur on Torture, to come and investigate the conditions at Pelican Bay State Prison. In response, Mr. Mendez petitioned the United States Department to allow him to visit the prison. And while this petition was pending, he flew to Los Angeles, California, and met with over 100 family members and loved ones of those that had somebody being held in isolation. And then we jumped on a plane that same day and flew out to Berkeley, and he had another panel in Northern California. So at this time, we became friends, and we'd meet up for coffee whenever possible and have discussions about solitary confinement and all the tortures of the world. And one day he called me a few years later, and he said, Dolores, I've been asked to go to Pelican Bay State Prison for the lawsuit Ashker versus Brown, and they've given me a list of names of people that I am to see. He said, your son is not on that list, but I am going to request to see him. I don't know that I will be able to. And I said, Mr. Mendez, just the thought that you would even attempt to is more than I could ever have imagined. So as the story goes, he called me and he was allowed to see him. But a week later, when I visited my son, when I sat down, this is no exaggeration, he had a smile from ear to ear. His face was shining so bright. And he said that his experience was the next best thing to actually getting a parole date. So I look at him as Mr. Mendez took my son a taste of freedom. My son described it as he heard the chains banging as they opened the cell door and went into the pod there, and he could hear all kinds of voices, and he saw the warden, the captains, lieutenants, all lined up around his cell, and he thought, this must be a search. And as they separate ways, they made a separation, and I actually envision it like the parting of the Red Sea. Up walked Mr. Juan Mendez to my son's cell door, introducing himself. Mr. Martinez, it is an honor to meet you. Mr. Juan Mendez from Washington, D.C., UN Rapporteur on Torture. And his first words to my son, according to my son, was, your mother sends her love. So, I never forgot that Mr. Mendez did this. Mr. Mendez knows that this work is ultimately about every individual human being. It is about each and every life that is at the mercy of this cruel and unjust system. It is about every child and every parent separated by these walls. It is about people like me and my son and each and every one of you sitting here in this room. I think that this is this understanding of the humanity of the heart of this fight that informs how Mr. Mendez approaches his work. And I respect him tremendously for that. Hopefully this gives you a sense of what a great honor it is to have him here with us. So without further ado, please welcome Mr. Juan Mendez.